All right, we'll get started. So welcome to the Town Council meeting 24-24. This is Tuesday, December 17th, 2024. The time is 6:05. We are in the Town Council chambers at 30 Main Street in Freeport, Maine. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. All right, our second order of business is roll call to see who is here. Councillor Pillsbury?
Present.
Councillor Lawrence?
Here.
Councillor Pilch?
Here.
Councillor Brown?
Here.
Councillor Smith?
Present.
Has to be one person. Councillor Benoit is here as well. Our third order of business is to waive the reading of the last meeting minutes and to accept as printed. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Our fourth order of business is announcements, which I do have some, once I find them. Thank you. So we are currently accepting applications for Citizen of the Year. The deadline for submission is December 31st. Dog licenses for 2025 are available now. The Department of Animal Welfare is requiring all dog owners to bring a copy of the rabies certificate this year as we are working to build a new statewide dog database. Online dog licensing is still available at maine.gov, but please note the fee for this service has increased this year. The short-term rental registration renewal period is now open. Applications were emailed to all short-term rental registration registrants. Registration forms are available on our website. There is also a link to pay the $100 renewal fee online. Town Hall will be closing at 2 p.m. on December 24th and will remain closed Wednesday, December 25th and Thursday, December 26th. I'd also like to share that we do have some openings on the Police Advisory Committee, and if you are interested, you can reach out to Chris Wolf and fill out an application. Our fifth order of business, any other announcements actually from anybody else?
I have one.
Okay.
I was just consulting with Chief Goodman before the meeting, and I wanted to share with folks that this week is the last week that you will see Janice Fogg directing traffic, letting out school buses on Main Street. She's retiring at the end of this term, so it's the end of this week. Janice started working with the Freeport Police Department in 1974. Off and on, she's had a variety of roles for the last 50 years, but she's decided this is time. It didn't stick the last time, so I'm not entirely sure. But if you happen to see Janice out on the street over the next couple of days at Holbrook Street or Nathan Nye, you can give her an extra honk or wave.
Any other announcements? Well, we have one hot off the presses right now. So this morning, Janet Mills recognized Maine Beer Company with the Governor's Award for Business Excellence. Congratulations. All right. Moving on to our fifth order of business, information exchange. So this is for us to share any information that we've heard from constituents, from any of our appointments and committee meetings, or anything else worth sharing. Anything from the council? It is holiday season.
Not a lot of committee meetings.
Not quite yet. I would like to thank our Assessor Min and our Finance Director Jessica Malloy for taking the time last week for walking councilors through some of the budgeting and assessing processes for the town. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the agenda. All right, our sixth order of business is the manager's report. Sophie.
So I want to thank everybody with FSAB, Freeport CAN, and our public safety team for all of their patience and input into the recently submitted Community Resilience Partnership Community Action Grant application. If this grant is awarded, we will have $75,000 to support the installation of a generator at Freeport Community Library, so it could be used as an official heating and cooling center. Completing and testing the Freeport Emergency Management Plan, and a bevy of public outreach materials related to community resilience. Special thanks goes out to Megan Shore and Caroline Pelletier for all of their hard work. Researching and writing the grant was not an easy lift, and they did a great job. I just want to make sure councilors are aware that we submitted 6 projects in the 2050 Connect 2050, which is our regional transportation infrastructure plan. It's my understanding that the folks heading up the project are a little overwhelmed by Freeport's requests, so I have a feeling we'll be answering a lot of questions over the next few weeks. The Dogbone Work Group is undergoing final edits to their report. They're going to be presenting that report to council on January 7th, along with an updated MDOT community planning partnership initiative scope of work, because Brett has had some conversations with Maine Department of Transportation planning staff, and along with being very receptive to including North Route 1 from Upper Mast, up from Kendall to Upper Mast Landing, they're also very interested in including the Dogbone work into the back, so it would be a true corridor. So we're kind of excited to see that. Last week, I think it was last week, maybe it was the week, it's the week before, because I was on.
Well, what is it? I can tell you.
At some point in time, we had a joint workshop between the Planning Board and Project Review Board. This was the second check-in with the consultant around the design review ordinance changes. The consultant is working on that draft ordinance, which is expected to be reviewed by both boards in late winter, so February-ish. Public Works has been out and about responding to winter weather and significant warm rain. So it has been quite a just as they plan for one event, they have to spin and be prepared for the next. Just want to remind folks that we've got some holiday closures. On the 24th, we're closing at Town Hall, is closing at 2 p.m. We'll be closed on the 25th. We floated an employee holiday to the 26th for Town Hall folks. So we'll come back the following week. The 31st, we close at 2, and we're closed on January 1st. I would encourage folks to check out the library website, because their hours are going to be a little bit different than that. They have more staff and can kind of flex a little bit differently. And of course, our public safety response folks will be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Any questions for the manager? Okay. I did want to add for the record that Councillor Egan is not present today, and he did let me know that he is excused for work reasons today. Okay, our next order of business is our public comment period for those who are here and for items not on the agenda. We do ask that we keep our comments to 3 minutes or less. And if you are interested in speaking, please walk up to the podium.
I'm actually here, it's not on the agenda, I'm here to give you an update.
I'm sorry, can you introduce yourself, even though we all are
Yes.
aware?
Hi, my name is Tawny Whitney, and I'm actually here with my FEDC hat on, and I appreciate that. I was able to attend a conference called ICSC in New York City, and it was so amazing. There were so many retailers there, from Jersey Mike's to Starbucks to Home Depot to somebody who wants to give you an oil change. They were all there. It was fantastic. I attended the same conference 3 years ago in Boston, And when I was at the conference in Boston, I was so surprised to find out that some people don't know that Maine's a part of the United States, let alone they don't know where Freeport is, but they thought we might be connected with Canada. This time, I go all the way down to New York City 3 years later, and things have changed dramatically. I actually heard people overhearing them talking about LL Bean, and I was like, wait a minute, where are you from? It was amazing. And so I did learn while we were down there, but it has really resonated with retailers all across the country. The big investment that LL Bean has made in our community is all over the place. And the second thing that they are recognizing is that now that LL Bean is changing their footprint and expanding across the country, a lot of these retailers are now neighbors with LL Bean, and they are like boasting about it. And it was fun for me to hear that as such a big LL Bean and Freeport fan. It was really remarkable to hear that and see what a major change that was. So therefore, when I had conversations with national brands, they have been in touch with me. They want to know. We really do meet a lot of the criteria that they're looking for. So it was an excellent opportunity. I also met with WS Development, who has the Shaw's Plaza while I was down there, and Wilder, who has Village Station. So I was able to get an update on their plans that they're forecasting, which are great. And then with Wilder, again, I saw some of the plans that they hope to achieve. And we talked about bringing back a meet and greet with Wilder, where they will, we'll arrange it through the chamber, where they will meet with the business community to share plans that they have and foreseeing for Freeport, and share some of the development projects that they've done elsewhere, and then hear from our business community. So I just am so proud of the direction that Freeport's heading. I also heard about our neighbor here, Maine Beer, while I was down there. So it's just remarkable. I'm proud of Freeport and the work we're doing, and privileged to be a part of the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think my name is Peter Anzolini, South Freeport. I think some of you will be happy this evening. After the last couple months of sharing what the assessment process and what I believe is injustices and inequality within the district and within individual households, and based on the meeting that you had in December 5th, I believe it was, I got the sense that you really don't want to do a reassessment of the town. So I would urge you all to, at least if you don't do that, to set up a board to really look at and deal with the assessment process within Freeport. Because as I see all these plans that we're developing, all of them will have impacts to other people within the community with regards to the assessment and regards to finally the tax component of it. So with this, I would like to tell you that my tax assessment fairness marathon is over. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I think you'll be happy to see an action item further on the agenda for answering some of those exact questions. And thank you for attending that workshop last week as well. Any other public comment for now? Okay. We'll move on to our 8th order of business, which is to take action on the following items of business, with our next item being the consent agenda. Councillor Pillsbury, could you please read the be it ordered?
Sure. Be it ordered that the December 17th, 2024 consent agenda be adopted.
Second.
So reviewing the consent agenda, we have some donations for heating assistance, the fire department and the library, a few appointments as well. Anything we would like to pull off for discussion? Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We will move on to our first public hearing of the night. So this is item number 271-24, relative to a fire truck purchase. Councillor Lawrence, will you please read the be ordered? Or do you want to introduce it first?
So I believe.
Oh, we opened the public hearing first. That's right. So yeah, we'll open the public hearing for anyone who would like to speak about the purchase or the ordinance.
My name's Daniel Winship, 16 Prout Road. Now, last time I was here and we talked about this truck, I talked about loads, axles. Now, I found out information on Yama's truck. That truck is not waiting for parts. That truck is broken. The frame is broke. It's all done. That truck carries too much weight for what it's designed for. A double axle truck adds 30,000 pounds worth of carrying capacity. Just one extra axle. That's what we, in my mind, should be looking at. Because this truck is overloaded. Or that truck wouldn't have a broken frame. I'd just like to say one thing to our fire department. My hat's off to them. I still have a home. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? I think, yeah, you want to speak to that?
Well, no, not.
Should I close the public hearing first, or?
So just to put this item in perspective, it feels like this has been in front of the council many, many, many times, but it is a function of our purchasing authorities under the charter. So in the charter, if you're going to borrow money, more than $100,000 of money, you have to put it out to referendum. So there were a series of votes and a public hearing around whether or not it should be put on the ballot, and then once it was on the ballot, we had to do the public hearing. Now that the referendum passed, the referendum had to do with you approving the ordinance. In Freeport, you are only allowed to appropriate money in excess of a certain dollar value, which $1.5 million is far in excess of $500,000, via ordinance. So there is a fancy ordinance that meets the requirements of most bonding agencies that council has been provided, and this is a public hearing on that ordinance. If you adopt the ordinance, based on all the other information that you have, my next step would be to sign the letter of commitment to hold the truck until it comes in the summer. And we would float the actual bond in the spring. So.
Just to clarify again, this is allowing us to spend up to that amount and bond up to that amount, but we are not yet committed to borrowing that full amount. That's the decision we will make later in the spring.
You will make that decision in the spring when we start talking about the cost of money and over time what makes more sense to the council and the capital plan. I think that's something that the finance folks will talk about.
Do we have a, oh,
So, I mean, I think one of the issues that was brought up, and I am not a mechanic, but I've sat through several of these conversations and I've looked at lots of pictures. The underside of the ladder truck was completely rusted out. It's 27 years old and it had lived its life.
do we know, what kind of warranty do we get on a new public safety vehicle?
I bet Chief knows that answer.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. The new warranty, with the way that the vehicles are being built now, manufactured, the frame rails of the trucks are in the aerial application. They do what's called a flame-treated process. The warranty on that process is 50 years. That's So they're kind of putting their, their money where their mouth is, so to speak, with that. So the way the truck is built, the way that the processes that they use to protect the metals is going to last us a lot longer now. They do on engines, because the frame rails are a little bit different. They do a galvanization process where they actually dip it in a vat of galvanization. The problem we have with the aerial devices, the way that the torque box is built, which supports the big heavy aerial on top of the truck, they're unable to do that. It's a closed vessel. You can't put that in a boiling vat of material without having a chemical reaction to that. So the way that they do it, they do a flame-treated process, and again, they back that up with a 50-year warranty against corrosion.
What about the frame of the truck? 'Cause that's what we just heard, is that the frame was,
Again, in regards to that, the truck is engineered and designed to meet the standard that it has to meet as a quint. This truck has a 100-foot ladder. The ladder construction configuration is different than what we currently have or what's currently out of service now. The ladder on the new truck will be made of aluminum, not made of steel, so that's a little bit lighter material, obviously, than steel. So with that being said, this truck also has a tank and a pump. It's a rated 1,500 gallon per minute pump. So this truck will be able to carry its own water, 400 gallons of water, and it's able to pump its own hose lines, if you will, as well as being a ladder truck, and giving us the reach and availability essentially to perform rescues or whatever we need to do with the vehicle. So with that being said, the truck is designed as a single axle vehicle. I think I'd mentioned one of the last meetings, there's several of these trucks that are in the state and neighboring states that are in service and have not had any issues with the manufacturing or whatnot with it being a single axle. I'm not disputing what the gentleman's claims are with tandem axle and all of that, and we're braking capacity. But again, we have not had any issues with these particular vehicles being single axle. I'm not aware of the situation in Yarmouth that he spoke of. I'm very good friends with the chief and the deputy chief in Yarmouth, and I have not heard anything about a truck being out of service with broken frame rails. Brunswick as well, their aerial is a tandem axle. It's a tower, which means it has a bucket on the ladder as well, much like Yarmouth's. So again, the construction, the design, and whatnot, that it warrants that. It's a much heavier device. And again, different manufacturer, steel ladder. Steel ladder is a little bit more, a little bit heavier than the aluminum aerial.
Chief, is there any kind of SOP with this sort of equipment where you would vary the weight, say how much water you are carrying in the tank, depending on the season, the condition of the roads, that sort of thing? Or would it just always roll out fully?
It's going to roll. It's once the truck is in service, it's going to be, obviously, we're going to change our SOPs and how we operate a little bit differently than how we operate now. I'm going to venture to say that truck is probably going to be the first truck out of the station, along with our tanker, going to our rural community, or our rural parts of the community where we need the water as well. And again, 400 gallons of water is nice to make an initial quick attack, but it's not enough to suppress a full-on structure fire. We really do need the water, and that's the reason why we have the tank truck. Even our engines that we have, they carry 750 gallons of water, even though they're fairly big trucks. They are single axle as well, and they are loaded with a lot of equipment. All the ladders we carry now are all aluminum. With the new truck, the way that the truck is engineered, essentially, is it has aluminum wheels. The wheels of the truck are not steel wheels, they're aluminum. It has two different axles. There's a Dana axle, and then there's a Meritor axle, one being the front and rear axle, and those are engineered, again, to handle the weight loads that are put upon the vehicle itself. The factors that come into it, the safety factors, is this truck is set up to carry 6 firefighters. With that being said, the engineering is back engineered, if you will. So the weight of 6 firefighters, the air packs that we use, the water weight, the ground ladders that we carry, All of that is factored in kind of, as I mentioned, reverse engineered to give us basically a capacity of when the truck comes in, the equipment that we put on the vehicle, we're allowed another 2,500 pounds of equipment that we can put on. That's our axes, our saws, ladder belts, all of that stuff is factored into that as the extra equipment going in the toolbox, so to speak.
Any other thoughts or comments? Any other public comment? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So we'll close the public hearing, and now we'll read the be it ordained.
Okay, be it ordained that appropriation ordinance 105-24, fire ladder truck in the amount of $1,500,000 be approved.
Second.
Great. All those in favor? Aye. All right, so we will move on to item number 272-24 to consider action relative to the repeal and replace of Chapter 46, General Assistance Ordinance of the Freeport Code. Sophie, could you introduce this one?
Open the public hearing, and I'll introduce it.
Want me to open a public hearing? All right, and we'll open up the public hearing.
So I'm going to just introduce this as the town is required to have a general assistance program. We are required to have an ordinance that mirrors the state law, so there isn't a lot of discretion allowed in the ordinance, some. We are asking the town council to revise the ordinance to bring it into compliance with state law, well, for a couple of reasons. But the first is to bring it into compliance with state law and Department of Health and Human Service standards. So those changes adds a requirement for trauma-informed, culturally and linguistically appropriate services. It mandates that applications will be accepted at Town Hall whenever Town Hall is open. It mandates that the General Assistance Administrator have actual training in the program. Who knew? It defines what a landlord is and an operator. That operator is around somebody who has sober homes. It provides a requirement that if somebody has an emergency and we're having a hard time verifying the information, that we still have to provide a pro rata amount of benefit while we work through that process. It limits the number of days for hotel or motel stays to 30 days in a 1-year period. It increases our responsibility for if we move an applicant, somebody was in Freeport, they were homeless, let's say, and they found a rent in Yarmouth. Currently, we would be responsible for assisting that individual for 30 days after their move. Now it will be 6 months. It allows us to actually make payments to the operator of a certified recovery residence. So if we had somebody, for example, who was homeless and then went to recovery home, sober house, we could pay their rent. Then there are some changes that are about personalizing it to Freeport. We start by actually putting that the ordinance is for the town of Freeport in the area that had previously been left blank. And I added language around not discriminating against based on gender and gender identity that was not there, which is gender identity is not something that the statute requires, but it seemed in keeping with what we would expect. And changes son or daughter to dependent children. And throughout the entire ordinance, we made some changes to pronouns and grammar to reflect a more gender-neutral approach. That's it.
So the public hearing is open if anyone would like to comment. Not hearing any, we will close the public hearing. And then we'll get it onto the table. So Councillor Pilch, could you please read the be it ordained?
Be it ordained that the repeal and replace of Chapter 46 General Assistance Ordinance of the Freeport Code be approved.
Second.
Great. Any discussion for the manager or amongst the councilors? My understanding is this makes us compliant with state requirements and then a few personalizations, so pretty simple.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Okay, we will move on to item 273-24 to consider action relative to a new liquor license for Grande Burrito at 115 Main Street. Is there any background info? Oh, we'll open the public hearing. Is there any background information you'd like to share, Chris?
It's just a basic first-time application, so we really don't have anything to base it on. I mean, other than he's held liquor licenses in the past, never had violations. This is going to be a small establishment, 3 tables, 12 chairs on Main Street. And so I don't see any reason for not approving this.
I will say this business was also the recipient of a fit-up grant as well. So the public hearing is open if anyone would like to make comment. Okay, is anyone online? No,
Just Jim.
just Jim. All right, we will close the public hearing, and then Councillor Brown, could you please read the be it ordered? Sure. Make sure you turn your mic on. Yep.
On here. Be it ordered that a new liquor license for Grande Burrito at 115 Main Street be approved.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, moving on to our next public hearing. This is item 274-24 to consider action relative to a final application for Maine Cannabis Exchange LLC for a Town of Freeport Cannabis Cultivation Facility license. Is there any background on this one? We'll open the public hearing.
The business owner is here too if you have questions. This was a priority application, which means that this business was already in establishment before we put this ordinance in place. And so they were deemed priorities. They've met all the criteria in the ordinance for their applications. And I don't know if you have questions for Peter.
Is there any public comment on this one? Public hearing is open. Okay, we will close the public hearing, and Councillor Smith, could you get it on the table?
Yes. Be it ordered that a final application for the Maine Cannabis Exchange LLC for a cannabis cultivation facility be approved.
Second.
Did the inspection happen? And was everything satisfactory?
So your staff review memos, the code officer did say he had no issues. The chief of police is also in the audience, and his only question was about odor and a security system for the building. I don't know if you want to ask about that.
Yes, about 2 weeks ago, I performed an inspection at the facility. I wasn't familiar with the facility personally, being new here in the community. I did an inspection. There are no issues that were noted in my inspection of the property. There is a security system in place, as well as full fire alarm, smoke detection, fire alarm system, and fire extinguishers on every floor. So it meets all our requirements.
Other questions or comments?
I just want to disclose that I'm a butter to the business, but I have no financial interest, so I'm not recusing myself unless anyone sees a need for that to be the case.
If there's no further discussion, we'll close the public hearing. Great. I already closed it, didn't I?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. All right, so the next item is related. This is item 275-24. To consider action relative to a final application for Maine Cannabis Exchange LLC for a Town of Freeport cannabis manufacturing and processing facility license. We will open the public hearing. Any additional background?
No additional background.
Any public comment? Okay, so we'll close the public hearing. I'll read the be it ordered. Be it ordered that a final application for Maine Cannabis Exchange LLC for a cannabis manufacturing and processing facility be approved.
Second.
Any additional questions or thoughts? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, moving on to item 276-24, to consider action relative to amendments to Chapter 21 Freeport zoning ordinance and maps pertaining to a zoning map amendment application from Maine Beer Company to rezone a portion of a lot. We will open the public hearing. And Kyle, will you provide some background?
Applied for a applicant-driven zoning map amendment. Here, this map, screen it easier. So this parcel here is where Maine Beer Company currently operates. The parcel in question for the request. Okay. Is this okay? All right. So the parcel highlighted here is the one in question for the zoning change request. So if you can see the surrounding area, primarily from just north of Desert Road all the way south to the town line, is zoned as Commercial 1. So pretty much that whole Route 1 corridor follows that Commercial 1 zoning. There are a few parcels here in this area, largely because a lot of these lots, the structures front onto Stagecoach Road, have a RR1 or Rural Residential 1 zoning. So what the applicant was proposing, can be better seen here, is to bisect this abutting parcel into two zones. So leaving the rear portion, about 2.5 acres on the rear side, on the Stagecoach side of the lot in the RR1 zoning, but converting the front 2 acres closer to the Route 1 side to that C1 zoning. This would allow for future expansion of the business. So there's no specific development plans yet tied to the zoning map amendment, but it would allow for that future concept, at which time any plans would have to go to the project review board for site plan review or whatever necessary process there. So this application went to the planning board first as required by the zoning ordinance. So on November 6th, the planning board had its public hearing. They voted unanimously to recommend this zoning amendment. Their basis for that recommendation, as all zoning text and map amendments need to be found consistent with the comprehensive plan. You'll see that in the memo, we had this language here pulled out from the comp plan that speaks towards providing a diversity of jobs in the community, attracting new visitors to Freeport as a community. So the board used that as their primary way of saying that this application was consistent with the comprehensive plan. That's pretty much it. Happy to answer any questions, but I do believe that Brett, our development director, has a little more on that comp plan consistency piece around the business itself.
Thanks, Kyle. We don't want to be outdone by the governor of the state of Maine, so I think it's important to acknowledge the important economic impact that Maine Beer Company provides to the town of Freeport. They employ over 100 people, and not only do they pay a great wage, but they also cover 100% of their employees' benefits, which is really impressive, and it's what we need in town. They bring about 400,000 people a year into their tasting room. Steve will tell you that they're really a small manufacturing business, but for other local businesses in town, 400,000 people coming is a great thing. And they also export the brand around the state and the country. I've seen it in other parts of the country, and it's always a pleasure to see that Freeport product there and a great representation for the state of Maine. So as Kyle said, the project is consistent with the comprehensive plan, but I think you'll see that the way that they've approached this request is consistent with the way they operate in town, which is courteous to their neighbors, considerate of the community need, and thoughtful about their business growth. So we encourage you to support Maine Beer Company. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the public hearing is open, so if anybody else would like to speak, they're welcome to go up to the podium. Go ahead.
Good evening. Suzanne Watson. I'm at 21 Carriage Road, but I'm also Executive Director of Meeting House Arts. And I would like to speak on behalf, kind of following perfectly from what Brett just said. Not only is Maine Beer good for the commercial industry in the town, but they're also good for the not-for-profits. Maine Beer has done more than their share to support the arts, and they've lent volunteer time, they've done photography, they have supported and sponsored events that we've had. They've given all sorts of resources to the work that we do. And I think this is a reasonable request, and I encourage this kind of business in our town that supports all of us. Thank you.
Carrie Kinney from the Freeport Conservation Trust. I just want to simply say that I think they have, Maine Beer has conducted thoughtful land use planning in this approach, so I appreciate that, and our organization appreciates that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Great, so we will close the public hearing. And then Councilor Pillsbury, would you read the be it ordained?
Sure. Be it ordained that amendments to Chapter 21 Freeport zoning ordinance and maps pertaining to a zoning map amendment application for Maine Beer Company to rezone a portion of the lot located at 2 Stagecoach Road be approved.
Second.
Thank you. So I will just mention that I plan to abstain from this vote, but I want to be very clear that it's not because I don't support the project. I actually deeply support the project. Maine Beer Company, I was a huge fan of Maine Beer Company before living with Freeport was even on my radar. And I will just say that my husband is in a management role at the company, so you could very much argue that I benefit from this. But I just want to make sure it's abundantly clear that I am doing this to be transparent and clear, and I very much support the project and the proposal. All right.
I just have a couple quick questions for Kyle. Knowing that the planning board has already gone through all of this detail, I know that we just solved a problem a few months ago around lots that are bisected by different zones, and now we're creating a new lot that's bisected by different zones. And so what we did when we did that, we were concerned about the fact that there were some lots that essentially couldn't be compliant because of the way that was. But given the fact that what's now being divided is sizable acreage between the two different zones, you don't foresee any issue with any approved use in either of those zones being able to fit on that section of that.
Correct. Yeah, this
lot.
is a pretty unique situation. You're right, like bisecting lots can be messy, and sometimes it's hung over from old zoning lines or whatever the reason is. But with the 4.5 acres here and roads on either side potentially being used for frontage, I mean, there's a lot of different options here. That front 2 acre, like if this parcel were to be split at some point, for instance, along that new zone boundary line down the middle there, you would have a conforming lot on the RR1 side with the frontage on Stagecoach and the 2.5 acre lot size. the 2-acre lot could be combined into the existing parcel just to add more land to that parcel. It doesn't, you can see it like doesn't fully connect to Route 1 there, so it doesn't have road frontage itself, but that doesn't mean that couldn't, be done in some way. But yeah, based on like the size and the configuration, there wouldn't be any major concerns there.
Great, thank you.
Dan?
I have a question for Mr. Mills, but don't get up yet because I want to ask you the question after we vote on the ordinance, or on the change anyway. So just don't run out the door.
Cryptic, sneaky, okay. Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye. Mr. Mills. So I didn't want your answer to impact the way we would vote or feel like you would be restrained by giving us a candid answer. Question, how was it to get the change that you needed approved? I remember when you first brought the idea to us, I can't remember how many months ago it is, and now it's kind of done. So do you have any comments on what it was like to work with the town, different departments in town, different groups? Was it easy? Was it hard? Do you have any feedback for us?
Yeah, hi, I'm Steve Mills. I'm a resident of Freeport. I'm also the CEO of Maine Beer Company. So the process, I don't have, it's an unfair, I don't really have anything to compare it to. I would say that what I did find, to be open and honest, right, that it was a little bit unique as we go through it. So this is the 4th turn I've had in this room, right, 2 with you, and 2 with the town planning board. Everyone was being kind and gracious. I thought it was a little interesting as we're just trying to set the agenda that public comment was accepted in both rooms with both the town council and the town planning board. I thought that was a little bit unique that people got to throw in their 2 cents at that time. But other than that, I thought it was smooth as silk. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. If you have further candid feedback that you don't want to share in public, by all means, let me know.
I'm being open and honest right now. I thought that was the only 2 things that was like, well, come on, there's time for public comment. I'm not sure. But if that's the general way that Freeport is going to operate, then, so be it. That's the only thing that's my blink reaction.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
So I love to hear feedback. And I wish Freeport could do it different, but the state law requires that we allow for a public hearing for the planning board to render its decision and for you to render yours. So we should maybe talk to Melanie Sachs so that we could streamline.
Rumor has it he's got connections at the governor's office now.
Yeah, so. That's right. There you go.
I think. Sorry, I want to make sure I understood clearly. Like the public comment, I think is fantastic. I think when you're setting the agenda and that's it, and then you're listening to public comment when you're setting the agenda. I don't know. That seemed a little bit odd to me. But again, it's not my town. I just live in it and work in it. But you asked my and I gave it to you. So yeah, that's it.
So I think living and working in town kind of makes it your town, but that's, and I'm glad you clarified, because I do think that that's feedback that could come back to both boards.
All right, moving on. So we'll move on to item number 277-24. This is to consider action relative to adopting the draft climate action plan created by the Town of Freeport Sustainability Advisory Board. So we will go ahead and we will open the public hearing. Councilor Smith, would you like to introduce this?
We shared a little bit about this when we set the public hearing at the last meeting, the fact that this has been essentially before the council for the last 6 months or so. I do know that there are members of the Sustainability Advisory Board who are going to speak during the public hearing to address certain parts of this. And we had a brief conversation at the last meeting that will continue in terms of how we're framing the implementation table of the plan. So that'll come up when we actually take up the item. But I think overall, this is kind of the final step of having this public hearing, because not only has the Sustainability Advisory Board conducted extensive outreach to the community and sought input from the community, we also brought it up at all of the district meetings with FSAB folks available for response. So the community has been well engaged, but we're eager to hear what folks have to say tonight as well.
Great. So the public hearing is open if folks would like to speak.
Hello, my name is Vali Steverling. I am the co-chair of the Freeport Sustainability Board. And I'm here to give a very brief introduction. There will be 3 other members of our board who will speak very briefly also. But I'm here to basically say that we're very excited to bring this plan to you. It's been in the making for a couple of years. And the overarching reasons for bringing this to you, I think we already know. Things have changed in the last very brief 25 years that we've been farming on the water. We've seen that the bay no longer freezes. We see new diseases in the water that have been brought in by warmer ocean temperatures. We have seen storms. We all have seen them. There have been cases where culverts have been washed away. Just in last January, the wharf, the yacht club were flooded. We've seen storms where we have lost power. Schools have been closed. So it's been, a big change in a very brief time. So the plan addresses both the reasons, the root causes for all these changes that we are struggling to cope with, and also meaningful measures for adapting to climate change and providing the services that residents in town need to be able to live with the changing conditions. So there's a grant that we have applied for, which will address the latter part of the plan. And it's a resiliency grant that will actually address the impact and how we can provide the services to the residents of the town. We're very excited to get that grant. I think we can get it and start quickly implementing the plan. And alongside that, we have a menu of different options that the plan provides for residents and the council leadership so that we can try to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions as pretty much a lot of the neighboring communities are doing. So in tandem with them, I think we can affect some very positive change. So that's all I have to say for now. There'll be another member, Mandy, who will talk about the process, and then Jim will talk about some of the priorities in the plan, and then Susanna will close up with just a few words about just why the residents need this and how residents can benefit from you showing leadership and approving this plan so it can deliver to the people of Freeport all the things that they have over and over told us that they want to see us do. So thank you so much.
Hi, Mandy McPherson, co-chair of the Sustainability Advisory Board. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the development of the Climate Action Plan. So the process kicked off in June of 2022 with a community workshop leading to Freeport receiving a community resiliency grant to share a sustainability coordinator with Yarmouth. Many of you will remember Mehdi, who did a fantastic job coordinating the Climate Action Plan process and creating the final documents. FSAB led the effort in concert with the Planning Department, and we worked closely with GPCOG, who provided much of the data. In October of 2023, after the first phase of data collection, analysis, and further community input, the Town Council endorsed a set of targets proposed by FSAB to reduce community-wide and municipal greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050 and 2040, respectively. Adoptions of these targets was in no way binding, simply a goal. They help guide town efforts to promote resiliency and minimize its contribution to climate change. They serve as benchmarks to measure progress and establish long-term commitments for a sustainable future locally as well as globally. The creation of the full Climate Action Plan followed, and it involved many factors: direct outreach to a wide number of stakeholders, collection and analysis of numerical data, the gathering of staff input, best practices, and state and regional activities and opportunities, along with several workshops and other events to get community ideas and to consistently show the plan in progress and encourage feedback. All of this was streamlined, contextualized, and sorted into the categories of public health and community resilience, healthy natural lands and waters, smart waste management and circular economy, efficient buildings and clean energy, and connected mobility and land use. The next step in the process, and why we are here tonight, is to adopt Freeport's Climate Action Plan. This is timely. Neglecting essential attention to address and lessen the impacts of climate change at a local level can bring extensive social capital and environmental costs. By taking action now, the town can position itself to leverage public funding, grants, and other resources. It can coordinate the process with the downtown vision, the comprehensive plan, and annual budgeting in order to steer our community towards a resilient tomorrow. The plan includes a detailed implementation table linking goals, strategies, and actions to guide the decision-making process. Like the emissions targets that the Town Council adopted in 2023, there is no mandate, nothing to force any of the actions. What the CAP provides is a baseline, benchmarks, goals, strategies, and potential actions for tomorrow and into the future. It is a roadmap to emissions reduction and local community resilience. It is based on deep research and analysis of data locally, along with an understanding of community desires and best practices. Thank you for your support tonight and throughout the process.
Hi, my name is Jim Reinertsen. I'd like to speak about the Climate Action Plan priorities and implementation ideas. The fundamental priorities are basically, as mentioned before, to prepare and protect our community from the intensifying impacts of climate change and to reduce our contribution to climate change. So within each of the 5 focus areas that were mentioned, the plan includes goals, kind of general goals, and then strategies that reinforce those goals, and then possible actions that fit within those strategies. So it's a wide-ranging set of ideas, again, to help the community prepare for climate change and minimize our contribution to the problem. An implementation table, again, when you get down to the level of actions, those are all optional actions that some involve the town, some are more involved, partly the town and partly other organizations. Implementation table has some ideas about different benefits for the actions, possible timeframes, who might be involved in carrying out, implementing the actions, and other notes, including notes about possible funding sources or leveraging sources from the state or the federal government. So I just wanted to encourage you to support the plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much. My name is Susanna Hancock, and I'm also a member of the Freeport Sustainability Board. Professionally, I'm a polar climate researcher. I advise at international climate negotiations. I just got back from COP29 in Baku, and I also lead an international ministerial group with governments from 6 of the 7 continents, with experts from Antarctica, on things like sea level rise impacts around the world. So, yeah, I mean, just, internationally, nationally right now, we're really talking about the importance of local action. And this is something that we're really trying to have a sort of a build up and really build the foundation of local action in sort of around the world. But, for us, it's not just supporting that global agenda, climate crisis at large, or environment. It's really about the health and community livelihoods and conservation of what we love, both as a state and as local citizens right here on the shore of Casco Bay. Certainly, there's many aspects of the environment that we don't have control. It's mid-December. I want to be out skiing. Instead, I'm out rowing in Casco Bay, and I'm not hitting any ice. And I like rowing in the winter, but not this much. But there is a lot in our control. You know, the UN Development Program found that about 70% of carbon reductions and about 90% of effective climate adaptations are those that are housed within the community and municipal level. So in that sense, it is up to us. It's up to us as Freeporters to do something that both fits our town but also is bigger, contribute to something bigger than our town. We're joining towns and cities all over the world, and in our immediate area, from DC to New York City, from Boston, throughout the coast of Maine, our actions fit right into those of our neighbors. And the actions that are in this plan are those that come from the town. As was said, this is coming from meetings over several years with local businesses, council, feedback from residents, talks with students in the school districts. These initiatives put forward are centered around our community, and they're from our community. Volley mentioned the storms that hit Maine last January. I heard about those. I was several thousand miles away on a glacier in the Arctic, and I got an alert for a global sea level rise, and it was like, hey, check out these pictures. And I was like, wait a minute. That looks a lot like my hometown. So this is something that's hitting, the degree that we're seeing here isn't something that's out of the norm for us, but it's hitting global news as to what's happening here in Freeport. And this is, especially isn't something that's, out of the norm. It is maybe right now, but it's, this is going to be something that's our new high tide in, a couple decades, not something that's a storm surge. We're knowing that transportation is our largest CO2 emissions aspect in the state. We are currently in Freeport idling away 1 to 2 gallons of gas. 1 to 2 tanks of gas, per person per year. And even with $2 gas, for example, that's still $11 billion that we are wasting away in our economy. And so with the talks of things like that, addressing idling doesn't just impact money and emissions, it saves cases of cardiac and respiratory disease, and especially true when we look at idling around schools, et cetera. Globally, looking at lots of things that have been mentioned about sea level rise and acidification, which are especially true in our town. We're looking at agriculture right on the coast. We're looking at erosion. We're looking at shell fisheries. The point is that the actions within this plan that we're proposing and what we've had from the community is not just about, the climate or being environmentalists. It's about, conserving what benefits us. And as Mainers, we love the outdoors. We care about hunting. We care about fishing. We care about Lyme disease, clean air, and, the cost of a tank of gas. So thank you for considering this and for your support.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I'm not doing too well. So Louise Johnson, I've been following climate since the 90s. I have been an organic egg farmer for the last 20 years. I just retired and moved here, and I want to say hello to Freeport Sustainability. And so I just had the opportunity, and kudos for your 2 years of work. I just had the opportunity to read the action plans a few weeks ago, and I wouldn't have even known about this meeting if I hadn't happened to come to the town council meeting 2 weeks ago and find out that there was a public hearing. So I wrote something at length, because I don't do 3 minutes very well, and I don't talk fast. I have copies for everyone. So what I wrote down is a short list of vulnerabilities to Freeport that I think, I don't know if you missed them, but I missed them when I looked. And one was the complete, what I thought was too much of a focus just on CO2. That H2O is as significant as CO2 in terms of being a greenhouse gas. And warming and just wacky weather are very much the result of an endangered water cycle. And I explained that pretty carefully in the work that I did. And so land management to prevent dryness, drought, and infertile soil and all the tree diseases that we're having. Water is important to, to connect the dots with all of that. I added slow poisons. PFAS, everyone knows about now that it's gotten big press and banning on the farms in Maine. I added the Maine DEP 123-page study that they did significant work in 21 and 22 and found lots and lots of toxic chemicals in our seawater, in our marine water, fish. And I explained how that's related. Life begets life and a lot of other things. We have to stop poisoning everything. Or we won't have healthy soil. We will have saltwater intrusion into our into our aquifers because of an imbalance of water pressure between the ocean and the fresh water at the shoreline. There's a lot of reasons, but overpopulation, overdrawing, the aquifers will lead to first groundwater intrusion, where you will get a lot of flooding in your house, and after that you'll have saltwater intrusion, and you can't drink salt water, and neither can any of the animals or the trees.
Louisa,
I went on and on, but I had...
Louise, thank you very much. I want to be mindful of our 3 minute.
I went over.
Yes, but I want to say that counselors did receive this on the dais as well, so we did have this, and I know you have some copies as well.
I would just like to join you and support you, and maybe we could do something of an addendum to this information. Thank you.
Welcome to Freeport. Happy to have you.
Peter and Sweeney, South Freeport. So I don't know why I get the sense that I'm always the negative side of this conversation. So I think, I don't know, I hope all of you have read the 261 pages in the plan, and specifically looked at Appendix A, B, C, and D. So the implementation, and let me put it this way. I believe that there are issues within the climate and the changes, but I believe there's also about 85% of what's included in the project, in the climate plan, that is fluff, that is really air. So having said that, you understand where I'm coming from, right? So I would like to know a couple of questions. One is, what are you really trying to approve, right? Because are you trying to approve the 261 pages? And if you are, and if you look at Appendix A and Appendix B, there are so many items on there that are not clear and that have a cost to them. And that cost means, and it's not delineated, it just has $, triple $, double $. So if you're asking, if people are asking you to approve this and you're going to move forward with it, I think the taxpayers of Freeport would like to know, the element that you're spending on, the return on investment, and what is the benefit that you believe we're getting. The second component of this is, as a council, I think taking a plan like the climate change plan and changing CO2 and so on and so forth, I think it shows a lot of hubris. Because we're Freeport. We're 9,000 people. The globe is 7 billion. So if you think the 7,000 or 8,000 people can do something, great. Now, there are things in that plan that we can do. We can stop water from seeping from land into the ocean. We can get people to plant grass on the ocean side. Therefore, acid rain will accommodate some of that. Great stuff there. So, but a lot of the stuff that's in that plan is like dreamland. So the only other component I'd like to ask you is, what are you willing to bet personally in this plan? So if you don't make an item on 10 metrics, if you don't make those metrics, are you willing to resign from the council? Are you willing to repay if there is negative impact? The dollars that you spent? That's all I want to know is how much are you willing to put in into this other than spending taxpayer money. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Well, when Peter talks, I like to, and asks a question, I like to answer him if I can. So I think one of the things that's really important to recognize, and we've talked a little bit about the implementation plan, because during the district meetings, I think there was a level of concern because there are not actual budgets there, and it talks about short-term and gives months and midterm, long-term. What we had talked about was making a little bit of a language change that would make it clear that council would workshop with its advisory, the Freeport Sustainable Advisory Board, annually to identify the targets for that year. But much like the comprehensive plan, when we adopt it, it's a vision and it's goal setting. The reason it's important to adopt plans from an operational standpoint is that staff works under the direction of the town council. When the town council adopts a plan, even if there are aspirational things in that plan, it drives how we operate. Let me give you an example. If anybody's been in the Freeport Community Library recently and walked through on a maybe not as sunny day as you might think, it actually looks green. The lights, we've got lights that need to be fixed, and settings are not, they're not the right lights for what you need to read. The very beginning of our conversation was about what would it look like if we changed just the fixture within the light to make it LED, or are there other things that we can do to make it less energy consuming as well? So the reason that that's forefront in our brain is not that I am a grand environmentalist, it's that we've spent the last year talking about that is something that we should be doing in municipal buildings, right? When we talk about Caroline out looking for grant opportunities right now to do energy audits in municipal buildings, to be able to get the laundry list of low-hanging fruit and then more expensive, longer-term things that we can do within our buildings that we're going to have to fix it anyway, and if we fix it the right way and in an energy efficiency way, we are meeting the goals here. So it drives our daily decision-making when we understand the goal that council has. The second thing that happens is when those incredible opportunities drop in our lap to be able to fund an aspirational thing, you have an adopted plan. It gives us the validity and the backup to be able to apply for the grant and actually get funding for those. So by adopting the plan, you put us in a position to leverage more state, federal, and private funding to be able to do these things that a lot of people would agree are in the best interest of taxpayers in a long-term.
And I also want to say that one thing that's been, as I've been reviewing, especially the implementation table, what's been really striking to me is it's also a resiliency plan where it's items that we would want to be doing regardless of making sure our bridges are safe and can handle extreme weather, making sure we have a space for folks to go who are at risk and vulnerable to extreme weather events by getting a generator for the library. So it's, some of it is just good stewardship of a town outside of climate change as well. So I just want to say that as well.
Close public hearing first.
It is, yes.
My name's Bob Stevens. I live at 50 Moose Crossing. You appointed me, and I've served as a member of the Freeport Sustainability Advisory Board meeting, and I've also, as you know, been active in a citizen organization called Freeport Climate Action now. There are a lot of concerns about how much we can get done that's in this plan, and I understand those. We're not going to get them all done. We aren't going to solve the world's problems by what we do, but we'll be making some contribution, the contribution that we can make locally. And as the chairperson has pointed out, there will be things that we can do and can't do. And that many things that are in here make sense, whether you think they're caused by, your Uncle Joe or the climate change. There are things that we can do that will make the town a better place for the residents. A lot of them are in this climate action plan. A lot of work has gone into it. I'm really heartened by the town manager's approach to how this could be implemented. Not something that would just sit on a shelf, but would be there when it was needed, when we can go out and perhaps acquire funds from a source that will help us make these improvements here in town, make our life better for us and those that come after us. So, sure, it's not perfect. Nothing ever is. A lot of effort has gone in. The district councilors have had given all their voters in their districts an opportunity to come in and speak. Public meetings have been held. It's here now for you to adopt. It's consistent with the aspirations, the goals that you said earlier, and I hope you adopt it and we can get about implementing it. Thank you.
All right, before we bring it up here, any other public comment? Okay, thank you. So we'll close the public hearing. And Eric, I believe you were going to read this one with the...
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I'll have you read this one for be ordered.
Be it ordered that the Climate Action Plan be approved with the following amendment to add the following line to the end of the introduction to the implementation table. That each year the town council will work with staff to hold a workshop with the Freeport Sustainability Advisory Board to identify the priorities for the coming budget year.
So a little bit of background, unless
You
we
want
have...
to second it?
I'll second it. Yes, I can do that. But a little bit of background. This was the amendment we had discussed last meeting, but I failed to get a motion and to move it forward. So here we are doing it today. And also, I think some of the feedback I've heard from folks is really sort of, the budget impact and how do we make sure we're not just kind of trying to do everything at once. And my hope and the intention is that this amendment helps kind of create that plan. So there's going to be check-ins regularly, and hopefully council continues to have folks who are fiscally minded and keeping the tax burden reasonable for folks, and that can be a consideration as well. So
I think just to follow up on that, and to follow up on Sophie's point, this is a plan. It's not an appropriations plan. And similar to the comprehensive plan, we adopt a comprehensive plan knowing if it is implemented, it will have fiscal impacts. But approving the plan itself doesn't create those fiscal impacts. This amendment is the way of saying we will be focused on what any potential fiscal impact would be when we talk about what the budget priorities are. And so that will be a consideration year after year, because we know that there are expenses that are coming our way. We know that we will build new buildings. We know that we will repair old buildings. We know we have HVAC systems that are failing. We know we have light systems that need to be updated. And with each of those decisions, there's money that's going to be spent one way or another, and this gives us some guidelines about how we can make responsible decisions across a whole host of considerations, including the Climate Action Plan.
questions, Dan?
I think we've said it before. I know I've said it before, but I want to offer a note of gratitude. This is an impressive document. There's an impressive amount of work that went into the document by the groups that are here tonight, by the community. It's not 2 years of sitting around waiting for somebody to draft something that you approve. It's 2 years of you going to meetings, thinking about what should be included, what the priorities are, how to structure it, even how it looks. I've commented on that before too. It's a nice looking document. But the meat of it is really important, and I'm really grateful that we have volunteers to do this kind of work to help town. So thank you for all that, and thank you for bringing it forward. I wish I could say this is the time to celebrate and let's pat ourselves on the back and say, great job, we've got the document, we're done. But it's, as we're finding, really just the beginning of the discussion, the beginning of kind of the hard work of, okay, we know what direction we want to go. How do we go about getting there? And those are not going to be easy decisions, because when the rubber hits the road or when the tax bill hits the wallet, we've got to figure out which are the things we want to prioritize. And I will personally be looking for more input from the boards, from the community, to say this in particular is really what we've got to do this year, or this is more important than that. So there's a lot of good guidance in here already. I think it's a great plan. I support it. I have two fears. One is that it binds us to spending a whole lot of money. And people have that expectation. We did the plan, now we have to spend the money. That's one fear. My other fear is that we don't do any of it, right? Which is bad in a very different way. So it's going to be difficult. I don't have an easy answer. I look forward to the discussion. I think we've got the right group here and there to continue the discussion. So I look forward to what it brings.
Chip.
It sounds like we don't have any plans, disaster recovery or anything for any kind of an issue in town. Is that true?
Well, I know we're working on them, and I know.
No, we have plans.
But I also.
We have plans from years past. I mean, they're plans, so it kind of makes it sound like we don't have anything and we have to do this. I like the plan. I'm not for approving it as a town document because it's going to cost us a lot of money. That's my biggest fear. It's going to. Two, we're already doing a lot of these things, just in the way the town is going through it. We're looking for ways to reduce how much electricity we use. So that's all in there. And what the plan will do is codify someone coming up here and saying, hey, we need to spend money on this. This is what we're going to do. And that's my biggest fear, because we'll lose control of that. We got a whole, not necessarily this council, but a council in the future come up and say, yeah, we're going to do this now, damn everything else. The other thing is once we ratify it, it's very hard to change it. Very hard to change it, because you have to revote on what you want to change. So it makes it less easy to pivot. So I think we should follow it, but I don't think we need to ratify it, as we say. I mean, it's a good plan. It's good general guidelines.
I do want to just mention, when we heard the presentations too, and I hear these concerns and we've talked about them, is, celebrating the fact that already we've applied for 2 grants that we've been able to kind of leverage. We have a plan, we're able to show community buy-in. Yep. And so, what that tells me is, yes, there's costs to some of these things, but also there's opportunity to pay for some of those costs. And especially with some of the plans we were talking about with emergency response, we're getting some grant funding, hopefully. We've submitted the application to pay for some of that. Yeah. So I just want to be aware of this is a way to maybe leverage and save money as well.
So I don't normally butt in, but I'm going to. One of the things I've discovered as I've become acquainted with Freeport is that Freeport has lots of plans. And when I was going through trying to make the case for a grant to evaluate pedestrian and cyclist safety measures on Pine Street, I came across an active living plan that had never been adopted. I have been charged with implementing a downtown vision that has never formally been adopted. So the problem with plans that haven't been adopted is when we try to leverage those plans to be able to do the things that are in the plan, we end up playing some verbal gymnastics, because I can't say it's an approved plan that has the council's full support. That's kind of why I'd rather look at the implementation table as guidance, if that's what it takes, and understand that we've got some really active community members that are going to hold council's feet to the fire to have those annual workshops and create those priority lists that then get discussed and prioritized against the rest of the budget and taxation. But having plans that are not adopted feels great. But when you try to use them and leverage them, it gets really difficult from an operations standpoint.
Any other thoughts, comments? Go ahead, Matt.
I think there's real concern around cost. There's real opportunity around grants and fundraising for this. But at the end of the day, the way I look at this is it gives us a guide star, right? It allows us to have something to make informed decisions around. It allows us to decide how we're going to use the limited resources that the town has and when we're going to do that. There's a real cost to inaction on this, and there's a real cost to not having any sort of roadmap or plan in front of us. And this isn't just a blank check that, we're approving and it's just going to spin out of control and we're not going to have any control over it. We're still going to have these debates and discussions. It's still going to be tedious as we look through the budget. This just gives us a chance to figure out where we want to go as a community, and we've heard that. We've heard that this resonates within the community, and it's not perfect, but we make better decisions with more data, more ability for the residents of this town to weigh in, and it feels to me that this doesn't lock us into anything. It gives us the opportunity to make better decisions, better fiscal decisions, and have a better chance at ensuring the resiliency of our town. So I think there's opportunity on both sides. There's caution, absolutely, but this is how we approach everything. And without any sort of plan or path forward, we'll make poor decisions.
We have the plan. This is the plan, well, whatever, I don't have it up here, but we have a plan. And we have a group that's going to hold our feet to the fire. They're not going away. The plan you brought up, we don't have an active living. It became part of complete streets, and there's the group changed, so the priorities changed. How many people were actually part of the plan, the process? You said there were many, many people that were part of the initial plan of this. I think there was a number that you brought, individual.
Individuals, there were about 70 stakeholders.
Would someone go up to sorry, thank you.
Grab one of the microphones.
Yeah.
I'm not best to speak to this, but I think we identified initially 142 businesses and people in town, stakeholders, groups in town. We had, individual meetings with over 70 of them. We had several 400 people who came to our community
400
meetings.
Individual people?
400
or
individual people
Okay.
outside. So, yeah,
I know
so
you had multiple meetings, but.
we had multiple meetings. Comprising about 400 people, 142 stakeholders that we identified. I think 70 something of which we had individual meetings. Some of that have been ongoing.
The point was, is we have 8,000 people in this town.
Yeah.
And 400 of them
And
are.
I also just want to celebrate the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we
that
did have some that were videos that, were sent out in mailers, and the meetings were open. So.
I also.
Yeah,
I would like to just also say that we did ask them to do more outreach, and they happily did. And so I think this is.
I have nothing against the work that you did.
I know,
I think it was
but I just
great.
want to say this is an incredible example of community outreach and rolling with it. So thank you for that. And, I very much understand the feelings of concern, and we got to trust the processes that we have in place of these checks and balances of these decisions. So any last comments? Okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We'll call it. Okay. So that wraps that public hearing. Thank you very much. And so we will move on to item 278-24. This is to consider action relative to renewal of the Memorial Park Hilton Garden Inn agreement. Councilor Lawrence, back to you if you want to get it on the floor.
All right. Be it ordered that the Memorial Park agreement between the town of Freeport and the Hilton Garden Inn Freeport be renewed for 2025.
Second.
Okay. This one seems pretty straightforward, pretty run-of-the-mill.
This is the same agreement that we've had since 2015 when I got here.
Okay.
Probably many years before.
All right, sounds good. Any discussions or questions on this?
I just have one question, Chris. Since you said it's the same agreement, has the fee changed over time?
It has not since I got here. It's been the $200 per event.
And is that on the fee schedule? So is that the same for anybody else using the park? Or is that specific to the Hilton Garden Inn?
That's specific to the Hilton.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
So the next item is to consider action relative to appointing someone to fill a vacancy on the RSU 5 Board of Directors until the next election. However, we have been asked to take a little bit more time, so we're going to table this one. So do I have a motion to table?
Yeah. So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Until our next meeting.
Until our next meeting, until the 7th. Okay, so all those in favor of tabling this item until January 7th?
Aye.
Can I just ask a point of clarification? Will we entertain other applicants in that time period, or are we closed to the applicants who have applied based on the original deadline?
So I'm under the impression that we are closed, but deciding between a few very highly qualified candidates.
We have 3 candidates. We went to the board to ask them what are they looking for. So we're waiting on answers back.
All right, so moving on to item 280-24. So this is to consider action relative to establishing a new town council finance committee comprised of 3 town councilors with staff support charged with completing a 2025 work plan.
So my name is here, but do you want to take it? You good with me?
Oh, sure. Do you want me to get it on the table first?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So Councilor Pilch, could you read the be it ordered?
I can. Be it ordered that a new town council finance committee comprised of 3 town councilors with staff support charged with completing the following 2025 work plan be established.
Second.
Why don't you start and I'll fill in as needed.
So we've been kind of talking around this for a while, and on December 5th at the workshop, the group, the 4 counselors present, chatted more about creating a committee and asked me to develop a charge, or, yeah, I guess it would be a proposed charge for this year. So a charge is not complete without goals and kind of what the scope is. And what we have here is to ensure communications necessary to meet the town's fiduciary responsibilities, to promote transparency related to questions and guidance that is currently available to town councilors on a one-on-one basis through individual discussions with staff, provide guidance on high-level financial policy matters, and to gain better understanding of technical municipal matters related to the town's financial matters. So the goals that we had talked about for the coming year included the monthly review of the town's revenue and expense budget reports, quarterly review of tax collection reports, and then special projects A through G. And of course, the last one is my favorite, others as referred. But the identified ones are to gain an understanding, further understanding of how the assessor determines just and equitable property valuations, review of the investment policy, evaluate the capital reserve funds and recommend methods to address the lack of available resources to fully fund the reserve accounts, develop guiding policy or principles for creating new and evaluating current municipal fees, review the town's wage and benefit structure, develop a process for town council's annual report, annual support for outside community organizations, and of course, all other duties as assigned by the town council and/or the town manager.
We've talked a lot about this, and this was, our workshop was sort of a testing space. Any thoughts or questions?
Just one quick logistical one about, there's a lot to this work plan. So I hope we can complete it all in 2025. But I hope that we give the committee some leeway to set their own priorities and say, this is more important than that. And we may want to come back and say, we'd also like to add H and get rid of D. So I assume that that's all within the scope of possibility.
And I think Sophie and I made this project list based on what we had heard from council. So this should be a pretty good start, but I think there's definitely space and time for that conversation. Yeah. And I will say, we have 3 folks on our appointment list for this. However, I do want to just remind council that if you're not on that list and you do want to come, please do. I think that's an important, robust space to have good conversation. All right.
I had a question.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember what it was. But I don't, so I'll pass.
If it is important, it'll come back. That's what they say, right? All right.
I remembered.
Oh,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Are we putting this in an ordinance like we do some of our other committees, or are we not doing that? I know there's pros and cons to both.
So my thought was we're in the process of looking at Chapter 2. Chapter 2 right now, I don't see where it speaks specifically to municipal facilities or appointments and the others. And I do think it's a good place to go to look at all of the charges. And as you've reminded me, we have a council that can, in 2 meetings, change an ordinance if we need to. So I would suggest that we put everything. If we're going to put some, we should put all of them in there. And I don't know that we have to do the special projects list. I think we could just say it's special projects. But that would be the goal as part of the revision to Chapter 2.
Got it. Okay.
Any thoughts? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, moving on to item number 281-24, to consider action relative to 2025 council subcommittee and liaison appointments. I forget where I'm at. I think Councilor Brown. Could you read the be it ordered?
Be it ordered that the council chair's councilor subcommittee and liaison appointments be confirmed.
Second.
So you have the list in front of you. I believe I had conversation with everyone before submitting this for the packet. There shouldn't be any surprises. I was going a little cross-eyed by the end of it, so if there's anything that doesn't reflect our conversation, please let me know, but it should be good. You will see also that the social and racial equity has a TBD. As we know, that committee is set to sunset this month, but is working on a plan moving forward. So as we see that play out, we'll determine the proper liaison for that committee. All right, any questions? Thank you for making it fairly painless. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
So that brings us to, yes, I skipped a page. Item 282-24, to consider action relative to approving the town council meeting calendar for 2025. Councilor Smith.
Be it ordered that the town council meeting calendar for 2025 be approved.
Second.
We also discussed this last meeting as well, and I Can you go over any changes you made, Sophie?
So based on the discussion last year, last meeting, what I heard was that we were going to keep the meetings that were scheduled on school vacation weeks, and that in lieu of a round of district resident meetings, in the spring, we were going to hold one community resident meeting on Saturday, May 17th, and that Special Projects Committee was going to plan that with the applicable staff.
And yes, Matt, I will happily make at-large counselors do the promo for that one,
Thank
or
you.
request that we do. Otherwise, I think it's pretty standard with what we did last time. Any thoughts?
Well, keeping the one over the holiday week in February, is that, I don't have any kids in the school, so it doesn't bother me, but other people do, and lots of people go away for that week. I don't know about this council, but.
Yeah, I don't know where I'll be. I go where I'm told.
Yeah, not to single you out, Counselor Pillsbury, but I think the rest of us are unaffected.
Oh, you're the only one that's affected. Sorry, forget it. Well,
I'm sure
Worth
it'll
noting
be
that
okay.
residents might be affected too. We might get
That's fair,
fewer
but we do
people
record
in
our
attendance.
meetings for folks to review. If it's comfortable with me, but if folks feel differently, I welcome that. Okay. All right, well, if there's no further question or comment, all those in favor?
Aye.
So now we're on to item 283-24. So this is to consider action relative to the property tax assistance program for applications received for the FY 2025 rebates. I will get it on the table. So be it ordered that town manager be authorized to issue 72 qualifying FY 2025 property tax assistance program rebates totaling in $50,112.39 in accordance with the Town of Freeport Code of Ordinances, Chapter 67, Property Tax Assistance Program.
Second.
Sophie.
Okay. So we had a total of 84 applications received, 72 individuals qualified. I think it's interesting to note that 60 of the qualified households had an income of less than 200% of the poverty level. 4 of the households were between 200 and 225%, and 8 of the households were between 225 and 250. The other piece that was interesting is one of the factors determining the amount of the rebate is the increase in their tax bill from one year to the next. There was the average increase was $391.58. And there was, the minimum was $74.74. The maximum was $1,090.51. So when you think about that in terms of the majority of those individuals being at 200% of the poverty level, kind of puts things into perspective. So you had approved $100,000 for this program in its inaugural year. This amount would leave approximately exactly $49,887.61. As I've mentioned to counselors individually, I think we have an issue with the methodology that we've adopted within this program. Part of that stems from heavily borrowing from other communities who've had success prior to some major shifts in the way state deals with the circuit breaker program. I was not, about halfway through, I was not particularly comfortable with the methodology that we were using being accurate to what council was trying to get at. On the other hand, I felt like it was really important to maintain equity so use the same methodology for everybody. I don't think that we unfairly cut out people, but I think we may have granted some people at a higher level than what another methodology may have given. I will say that I would like to figure out if there is a way that we can tap into the Maine Revenue Service data for what people are getting for their circuit breaker, so a tax rebate already through their income taxes. We are very lucky to have a former analyst for the Legislative Committee on Taxation, who has retired to Freeport, who was an applicant and, or at least came in during the applications, and explained to me kind of where we might be able to make some tweaks in the methodology. So my recommendation, along with making the awards, is that we, the ordinance committee, review this in another couple of months. Let me do a little bit more research and see if we can put something that's a little bit better in terms of methodology, given the circuit breaker program.
Questions or thoughts?
I have a question, which is, given that this was a brand-new program and we didn't really know how much to allocate for it, and we didn't know how many people would apply, and we didn't know how many people would qualify for how much, and we have essentially, using the methodology that we used, come up with a number that is, it sounds like, just a little over half of what was appropriated. Is there a way to equitably increase the awards, either by an additional lump sum or by an additional percentage of the award?
Could I just offer some color before
Yeah.
Sophie answers? The $100,000, I don't want to say it was a complete stab in the dark, but it was we don't really know how much this is going to cost.
Exactly.
Some towns have done this, some towns have done that, based on who's applied for this and that. We tried to estimate. So it wasn't a target saying, that at least at the ordinance level, and hope you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it was, we should give away $100,000. It was, let's start here and see what happens.
Also, are we rolling over? So whatever we don't spend this year rolls over into next year, which I think kind of helps with that, making sure it stays for the same purpose. Yeah.
So the answer is, of course, council can do what it would like to do. I do believe there is a statutory limit on what we can provide, and I want to say it's 1,500, but I'd want to look back into it.
And just to clarify, my question, and exactly to your point, Dan, is the fact that we didn't really know what this was, and knowing that this, whatever we allot to it, gets added to everybody else's tax bill. So I'm not suggesting we have to spend the entire amount, but also knowing that one of the reasons we implemented this was that there are particular residents who were having sort of a double hit of both the fact that the state program went away and their tax bill went up even more than many people expected. And so is this an opportunity to sort of, where we have the funds appropriated, where we could opt to go over and above what we had originally planned?
I like the spirit of that, and I'm wondering, it sounds like it could get complicated, because I know there were some instances where we almost actually gave people more money than their tax bill was, based on how they were taking advantage of other programs. But I would maybe consider that when you're thinking through future methodology, and if that is something we want to consider in the future when you're thinking through how we approve that ordinance and process.
I'll just add, I mean, we ran it as a pilot and in order to collect data, and I think that there's a lot that the ordinance committee can look at. I mean, we could expand the range of award, we could expand the economic qualifiers, we could expand the age range. I mean, there's just a million ways we can go about this. I would be hesitant to revisit the process because we advertised it, we had a set application window, and it was clear as to what the amounts were, and people may or may not have opted into it based on the amount or what they think. I think we let the data, I think we let the awards stand. We look at the data and we try to refine the program over time. I just think that revisiting it, while it's a noble idea, could cause some unintended consequences that may or may not be fair across the community. So my opinion would be, I think we've learned some lessons here and we try to make it better.
And part of my question is, I'm not even sure, given that we set this up by ordinance, I'm not even sure that we can unilaterally, without changing the ordinance, change what the formulation is.
Yeah, but I do think that's something that's really worth considering as we revisit the program, and as Councillor Pillsbury said, refine it over years. Other thoughts? Okay, so.
Thank you for all the effort from you and the other town staff that put on all those hours and did all the technical assistance and the number crunching. I think this is a great benefit to our community.
It was fun to meet everybody. It really was. It was, you missed some great stories.
Yeah, next year I would like to try and help with the office hours. All right, so it is on the table, and without any other comment or conversation, all those in favor?
Aye.
I look forward to seeing how this kind of changes and adapts over time. Okay, so moving on to item 284-24. This is to consider action relative to the 2023 foreclosures. I forget where I am. Who's that? Councillor Pillsbury. Could you please read the be it ordered?
Yes. Be it ordered that the town treasurer be authorized to record a waiver of foreclosure in the Cumberland County Registry of Deeds for the following properties as it is not in the best interest of the town for liens to mature on these properties: Champaign Lane, Valley Brook Drive, 10 Katy Lane, 5 Port Drive.
Second.
Jessica, go ahead.
Yes, so as just read, this is just an annual request that comes before you where we review properties that still remain unpaid on their taxes and whether it's in the best interest of the town to foreclose or waive foreclosure on them. And of these 4, actually, 1 came in and paid today, so 5 Port Drive, I do not believe we will need to worry about. But the first 2 are subdivision common space areas, which would not be in the best interest of the town to absorb. And 10 Katy Lane is a mobile home, which is typically never, a good idea to
A mobile home that is not on owned land.
Not on land, correct. It's just a mobile home. So, yeah, just as a note, oh, sorry, the hair's blowing in my mouth. I'm not used to straight hair. It's so long blowing. Anyways, so the town currently has 31 properties facing foreclosure. 3 of those are previously tax acquired, and we're working with them to try to obtain payment. Another 3 are under an active payment arrangement. And the majority of that list were in danger of foreclosure last year. So, I give you that information because we have a pretty high collection rate here in Freeport, and we work pretty diligently with our residents to make amenable arrangements to get taxes paid. And as you can see, last year at this point, we had 30 properties facing foreclosure, so where we only requested a waiver of 1. So we're right on track with where we normally are, if not a little bit better for where we're at. So feeling pretty optimistic about it.
Do we know, is there any correlation between the foreclosure list and the property, the rebate program
No.
list? No.
I just want to acknowledge that Municipal Facilities Committee often talks with Jessica about what are the properties that are in various stages of collection. And I have been repeatedly impressed at how diligently the finance staff works to avoid any drastic action. Because, of course, it's not really in the town's interest in most cases to foreclose on anyone. And so I just want to thank Jessica and her whole staff for what they're doing in terms of working to locate people, to make sure that they understand what their obligation is, and really work with them to come up with some sort of payment plan.
Thank you.
I have a process question. So how do we get to these 4, then what's going on with the other properties facing foreclosure?
So in the state of Maine, it's an automatic foreclosure process. So when we file a lien, if that lien remains unpaid, then it automatically forecloses within 18 months. So the only way it comes off that is by either filing a waiver of foreclosure or paying the tax. So because we don't want to just automatically foreclose on these properties because they remain unpaid, we are coming forth to ask for a waiver of that foreclosure. It does not stop collection. It does not stop our process as far as trying to collect the taxes that are owed. It just means it's not going to automatically foreclose to us.
And there is a way that if in the future we decided we wanted them to foreclose, you can kind of reverse that. Or wait a year, and you
It'll be
likely
there.
would have another foreclosure on the same property.
All right, any other questions or thoughts? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
My mic's not on. All right. So we are all set on that. Which moves us to other business. So the annual report on the general fund balance is our first item on other business. Jessica, you are back up.
I am back. So annually, we come before you to report on the town's general fund balance. As you know, the FY24 audit has been completed. So this is typically, once we have that process done, we come before you to let you know where our fund balance stands and give you a recommendation on potentially what needs to be done with the amount of unassigned fund balance. So there are actually 6 fund balance designations. They are non-spendable, restricted, committed reserves, assigned, and unassigned. The unassigned is basically what's left in your fund balance after the other 5 have been designated. And that currently, for this year, for FY24, stands at $5,601,823. The policy stipulates that we maintain a minimum of 1.5 months of our budget with a additional 5% allowed above that, which our policy maximum means we can have $5,090,357. So we are currently exceeding that maximum by $511,466. So at this time, staff would recommend that town council transfer the full $511,466 to the capital reserves. Personal recommendation in looking at this, based on where our unaudited December reserve balances are, would be to put $175,000 to the police reserve, $225,000 to the fire reserve, $100,000 to the public works reserve, and the remaining $11,466 to the solid waste reserve, to help build up those account balances to maintain more appropriate levels in comparison to those benchmarks referenced. I added an additional page this year just to start to aid in some discussion and get council thinking when they think about the fund balance policy. An updated best practice is really to have 2 months of your budget within your unassigned fund balance. If that was the case, we would actually be allowed to have $6,787,142 as a policy maximum, which would put us currently almost 1.2 million below that policy maximum level. So it's just making you aware of where we would be at if we kind of were to evaluate what we hold in our fund balance. And that's what I have for you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Dan?
It says 1.5 months of budget minimum.
Yep.
So is the minimum 1.5 months and the maximum is 5% over that?
Yes.
So our own policy requires us to have 1.5 months undesignated.
Correct.
Got it. But the new best practice is to have 2 months.
Correct.
Got it, okay. And then for reserves, I have a couple of questions, but I'm trying to figure out how to start. So if we wind up using some of our fire reserves to pay for the new fire truck instead of bonding the entire amount, would our benchmarks go down for that reserve account?
Say that to me one more time.
So
I'm sorry.
right now, the benchmark says we should have between $978,000 and $1.8 million in our fire reserves.
Mm-hmm.
If we choose to pay for the fire truck using some of those reserves, or actually, let me reverse, if we choose to bond the entire amount of the fire truck, do we still need that much money in the fire reserves?
No.
Okay.
Well, no, under existing structure, right? There are other things that come into the reserve, so
Right.
that you would still, I think, so the benchmarks are your 5-year, the low is your 5-year, the high is 20% of your 20-year.
Right.
So there's still, it's not quite to that level, but it's not going to just diminish by
Right,
the
right, right.
1.5 million,
This
right?
5-year included
Yeah.
the fire truck.
Yes.
And so if we take that out of the equation, we might not need that.
We might need
that. Yeah. So what
Maybe 500, but not.
Yeah,
as
if
of
we
right
bond
now.
it, do we put that 225,000 somewhere else? That's sort of the spirit of the question.
Yeah. In either situation, my recommendation would hold true.
Okay. Thank you.
Other thoughts? We don't have to vote on this.
Okay.
Jessica, if you could just pardon me just not knowing this yet. Are you looking for a nod so that we can create an item for them to vote on, or?
Actually, typically, this is where, if council is ready and willing, where there would be a vote so that we can actually move the funds.
I do have one question. Under the maximum, policy maximum is 678, our requirement is 643.63, and the audited for 630.24 was 561. What did we do about that?
Sorry, I can't hold my paper.
It's on page 3.
Okay, I'm getting there. They were blown away on me. So page 3 is actually just the comparison for the 2 months of budget. So I'm sorry.
So we're below.
We would be below if we were to change our policy to maintain 2 months of budget expenditures.
Got it, okay.
And that's our policy.
That's our policy. Yep.
Are you making a recommendation that we should consider a plan to get from 1.5 months to 2 months?
I think it's something to maybe discuss in the future. It's just, this is me just starting to introduce the idea that it may be something worth considering at some point. 1.5 months is not a long amount of time if something disastrous happens. Knock on wood, we really haven't had anything catastrophic of that nature happen in my tenure here, so it hasn't been an issue. But it's, in everything that I read, it's been actually a 2 month or 2 month best practice for quite a while, and we've never brought it forth to change. I just want it to start to be on a radar if there's interest to change it, that this is what it would take to change.
Yeah, I'd love to entertain that as part of the finance committee and at least model out what it would look like and how we get there.
Slowly.
Jessica, this is probably skipping ahead to capital budget planning, but looking at the balances as you've laid them out, there's only 2 which are above the average mark on the variance line. One of them is not only above the average mark, it's above the high benchmark. And is that something that when we get into capital budget planning, we would consider moving that money somewhere else where it's listed under boards and committees, where it seems like it's far in excess of anything we have planned?
Yeah, so that reserve balance is actually where it is due to an appropriation that's in there and being worked on. I want to say, I can't remember if it's ordinance work or capital plan. There's a form of funding, so you'll see that come down over time as monies are spent from it. But there was an initial influx of money into that reserve to fund a project. So if it either remains unspent or does get spent, you'll see it fall off in max of 3 years.
Is that ARPA money?
No. Okay. And rescue is the only other one that's above, and that's because it's a designated revenue source through our rescue billing. So that one typically tends to be self-funded.
Do counselors feel comfortable with the proposed plan? Do we want to vote now? Do we want to hang on to the next meeting?
I'm okay with the recommendations. I mean, putting it into our capital plan is what we need to do.
I will say it's pretty consistent with our overarching goals, Dan.
Yeah, it's consistent with what we typically do. Normally, if we're talking budget stuff, I would want to allow time for more advertising and input, but this is really just transferring from one savings account to another savings account, oversimplifying, but we're not spending or appropriating the money, so I'd be comfortable voting on it tonight.
And you know we have plenty of that discussion coming up.
Oh, yes.
Great. Does someone want to make a motion?
Is this a be it order or is this a move?
This is just
Motion to do.
Okay. I move that we transfer $511,466 from the general fund into capital reserves as allocated by the finance director.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, our second item. Do you need some things with you?
I just need Jessica to hang tight.
Okay. Our second item on other business is checking in on public safety staffing needs. Sophie?
Yes. So, when we went through the FY25 budget process, so very long ago, there was a lot of discussion near the end of the meeting about what were our staffing needs at public safety. And what I agreed to do was, actually, I think it was a bit of a compromise. I wasn't comfortable answering that because I hadn't had the opportunity to really work with the leaders in those departments and to understand what the needs were. So I promised that near the end of the calendar year, I would be back and be ready to have that conversation with you. So to prepare for that, I've met with the police chief and the fire chief and the finance director singly and all together to really talk about what are their wages looking like, what are their expenses, what are their needs. And what we discovered, there are two, so I have two suggestions for us, and I think we're preparing for items, not making a decision tonight. But the first, let's talk about the police department. There is a mechanism in place through the Police Advisory Committee to talk about staffing in terms of community need and community desire. What I am quite comfortable talking about is the fact that the number of hours that we're putting people on the streets right now is not fair when we look at the number of bodies that are working those hours. So we have an inordinate amount of overtime and special details. And I mean, 106 special details in Portland compared to, I think, an average of 7 in our neighboring similar communities. So right off the bat, we're at a bit of a disadvantage. But then we have absolutely no contingency within the department. So for a level of an industry that is now been in this cycle of people leaving and having to go hire people who have no experience and no training and take 6 to 9 months to get road ready. Every time we lose somebody and we have to bring somebody else in, we are requiring people to work a lot of overtime. So Jessica did some analysis for us, and what we determined is that right now we are paying more in overtime hours in a way that we believe a single body would absorb a lot of that. And we have savings because we were short-staffed for enough time in the department. So we have about $52,000 worth of savings for this year, which would allow us to advertise and hopefully bring somebody on. Bringing somebody on in the police department is roughly, if we get a candidate, takes 2 to 3 times as long as it would be to hire an individual for just about any other position we have in town, because there is such a rigorous internal process that they have to go through, background, and then testing that statute requires, and of course we wouldn't do it any other way, right? So we believe, and I think the analysis that Jessica did kind of shows that if we bring that individual on in a year, we would pay for that position just based on avoiding overtime. So there's a cash benefit. So I can make a cash argument. I would also make the argument that the amount of hours that we're asking our police department to work is above and beyond what other neighboring communities are asking their police officers to work. So when we look at that, we are either trying to get people who value a single focus of working for money and making as much money as they possibly can, which is kind of the old school traditional police model, right? But we want officers who are well-balanced, well-rounded, connect with the community, invest in whether it's our community or their own communities, and that work-life balance then becomes something that's really important to them. So we end up having to pay for the privilege. So I think there's a long-term benefit to bringing that work-life balance for the department back into a reasonable place. So I can make all sorts of hypotheses. And I'm quite comfortable that bringing a person in will not show a savings in the budget because we're expending that money, but instead would have it be base wage, more base wages, less overtime wages. The other piece, we have a police officer who will be retiring next December, and it's going to be horrible to see him go because he's amazing. But it would be really good for us to be able to be advertising now and bringing that person on, so by the time that individual leaves, we will have the ability to have somebody else on, so we're not further down. So Nate and I are generally recommending to you, here's the concept, we'll bring the writing to you if you agree with the concept, I guess is the, that we go ahead and add an additional individual to the police department roster to smooth the budget and to reduce the number of overtime hours.
We'll say we did talk about this last budget season, that this was kind of, you gave us a heads up this would likely happen, so right on track.
Does that assume that we are fully staffed now? All the roster positions are filled? No. So does that mean we have to fill one and then add one additional?
Yes, but if I have the vacancy, what we find is we go for weeks without anybody, and then we might get a couple. And so if I won't add a vacancy without council permission, just because you gotta, you know what I mean? I can't guess that you'll agree. So my thought is if we can, at the beginning of the year, add a position, it would allow us to advertise the position and also begin to get people prepared for a change and hopefully make it easier to recruit. I don't know that one position does that, but we'll take everything we can get.
So if we fill the currently open position, does that have an impact on our overtime because we have more people?
It will make it better, but I think we can still,
Your analysis.
So we're
took that into
dropping,
account.
yeah, so Nate is dropping positions that he's not filling right now. So we're not giving people the level of the number of officers on the street that we had. So that's how we're trying to mitigate, everything is a balance, right? And so bringing this other, if we fill the other position, we'll be at a point where we'll have eventually everybody on the street that we're supposed to. I'd like to be able to build some contingency so when people leave, we're not hammering our folks with overtime.
I'd be curious to dig in a little bit to the comment about we'll have everybody on the street that we're supposed to. What does that mean, supposed to? Is that just what we've always
Budget.
done, or?
Well, what we budgeted for, and my assumption is that there's been analysis with the size of the force. I will tell you that the force is very small for what it is doing.
Yeah, we've had a lot of discussion early on about that because it's difficult to judge. Should we have a similar size force to an equivalent size town in terms of population? Well, probably not, because we have millions of visitors, and maybe another town with the same amount of population doesn't have that. It was hard, from what I recall, to find the right peer group to say this is what it should be or shouldn't be. So it'd be, I'm not saying that we're wrong in our assumptions, but if we've been short by one officer, has that made an impact over a year? Should we consider maybe that could be our new long-term sort of roster to say maybe we don't need the same? So I don't expect we have the answers tonight. It's just something I think to look into.
I would say that we went through this round of district meetings where I heard all about speed and traffic enforcement and pedestrian safety, and Nate really he was the shining star in one of those where he was just getting hit left and right. And the point he makes of it's really important in Freeport to be able to have those types of educational details and opportunities for officers to be in and around to build community connections. We are running from call to call, and we are spending an awful lot of time investigating some pretty large-scale criminal activity. So we never like to lead with that. That's not Freeport, but it still exists, right? So I think if we want to get into what the needs of the community are, I would want to have that conversation with the Police Advisory Committee, because that's the charge that one of the charges that council has given them. From a budgetary standpoint and a personnel standpoint, I think we need to add to the roster. And I'm only asking for one right now because I can absolutely fund it. And there is, if I'm wrong, which I don't think I am wrong, there would be a relief valve next December when this person retires. So I think it's kind of a win-win situation at this point.
Right. One more last question is just about the overtime. Is the goal, or was your analysis anyway, to get the overtime down to zero? And the spirit of the question is that I believe that, especially with all the younger officers, there may be an appetite to say, I would like to work some overtime, not an excessive amount. So we might want to maintain some of that.
It is not to get us to zero, because I have a union to keep happy.
I also just want to really call out the work-life balance and wellness piece of this as well, and that's a pretty big priority, making sure folks are healthy and happy. So, Matt.
So I think hearing what Dan's saying, I mean, I don't want to get too in the weeds on this, but I'd love some context around what we have. It's clear what we have budgeted in terms of dollars, but what that equates to in terms of FTE and how we deploy them in an ideal scenario and what that means. Like, it's one thing to say we've got 2 people on a shift, but I'd love some context as to the number of calls that we typically get, where they're responding, what their typical patrol might look like, how they're interfacing with the community, what our expectations are, because we can debate, should we add 1 position or 2 or this or that or overtime up and down, but without knowing sort of what's happening or what we want to have happen with our folks, it leaves me with a bit of a disconnect there. And I think that's sort of the starting point is, what are we looking to get out of our force and how they interact and keep our community safe? And then we can kind of back into the number that we need based on what amount of overtime is appropriate and resonates with the workforce and what's going to be a recruiting tool and things like that. But I don't want to get too far into this because I know it could just derail us, but I'd love some context.
I love to give council context, and I think Nate is really prepared to look at the department that way, and I think it would be a great exercise to go through and to establish some norms that make sense in this day and age in an industry that has changed incredibly in the last 5 years. So I think that's great, and I think Nate and I can give you more information. I think it would be good to call in the Police Advisory Committee to only have to maybe give that information once. So maybe if we had a joint workshop of some sort or something like that. If I know that you're in general okay with at least trying to move forward with this one, we can develop the background for a full council order. I like the other business. It gives me a chance to trial these ideas before we put a lot more work into it. So, and then I think Nate and I can meet with the police advisory group and kind of tell them where council is right now and see if they'd like to join as one information gathering group. Does that work?
Yeah, I'll put out a call if anybody's watching and interested in the topic. We have a number of open seats on the Police Advisory Committee for just this kind of discussion, so I would encourage people to apply.
I would just like to say, it sounds to me like you and the chief are being very diligent in trying to make sure that we have enough people for our regular policing at a base level, and then allow for the overtime opportunities with the detail of which you said. So I feel like, again, given what Freeport is as a town, the number of events we have, the number of events that require police detail, there's always going to be opportunity for overtime. But you don't want to start our basic policing levels with the fact that just to meet that, everybody's required to do overtime. But the other thing, and I know we do look at this when we talk about budget, but I think the other piece of context would be to look at, because obviously part of the event fees is to cover that detail, how much of the overtime is sort of absorbed by that level of fees versus what's just in the regular police budget.
Yep, we break it down. We actually account for the expenses differently. Jessica's done a great job with that. She can run a report to tell me how many overtime hours, how many overtime dollars, how many detail hours, how many detail dollars, when a detail needs to be reclassified as overtime because fees get waived, that kind of thing. So, I mean, the way she accounts and keeps the books allows us to look at things in many different ways. So I think that that's a good thing. But that sounds, if I'm reading this right, if I'm not, you need to tell me, like a dual track at the same time. Okay. We will come back with more concrete information on one and a plan for the other. Okay. So fire was the other side. As you are aware, we've had some juggling in the fire department, and that juggling has allowed us to really look at the structure in the fire department. For years, you had a fire chief and a rescue chief, and they were kind of two separate entities, and then you combined and there was a fire chief and two deputies. One was a rescue deputy and one was a fire deputy. And through a changing of the guard, we now have a fire chief who has all of the credentials and experience with fire and rescue, and we have a deputy who has credentialed in both fire and rescue at the top levels. So we have this vacant deputy position. I do not want to fill a deputy position because we run on 24-hour shifts. Sometimes they're broken up into 12 hours for people that, to allow us to recruit people in. But in general, you're looking at a 24-hour shift. And our full-time crew, we have 4 shifts that work rotating. And if you go through that, it equates to 1 day on, 1 day off, 1 day on, 5 days off. It's an average of 42 hours a week without any overtime. My goal is, at least initially, so right now we have 4 captains because you have to have an operational person leading each shift. We have 2 of them here tonight. And 3 firefighter paramedic positions. That means that we have 3 shifts of 2 full-time people and 1 shift that has a captain who has 3 per diems. So we try to fill 4 floor shifts a day for each shift. So a captain, a firefighter, paramedic, scheduled for the shift, full-time, and then 2 shifts that people can sign up for. I will say our chief, our command staff has done a great job of reinvigorating an environment where people want to sign up for shifts, which is a great thing to see. But they're 2 people that could change all the time. I really think that the consistency of having a 4th firefighter paramedic is really important. So you have 2 full-time people on each of the shifts. So instead of 4, 3, we'd have 4, 4, and then 2 per diems shifts on each of those shifts. So what I want to do is get rid of the deputy chief position and reclassify it to a firefighter paramedic and fill that. And I think we can pretty easily because Freeport's such a great place to work. We had a long tenured retirement earlier this year, so there were payouts that impacted the budget lines. However, Jessica has done the calculation, and as long as so right now we're filling in overtime for that 4th firefighter paramedic quite frequently. So we believe that, well, we don't believe. The analysis shows we've got enough money to be able to make that change, even with the payout of the retirement, the unexpected retirement. So that is another one that's a concept that I'd like to throw your way. And I don't know so the degree of, you don't approve an organizational chart. You approve a budget with a general number of people staffed for that budget. So I don't know if I need a formal council vote to eliminate a deputy chief and add a firefighter paramedic, or if it's a matter of me telling you that's what I want to do, it fits within the budget. Long term, it's less money. But I am really sensitive to not doing, I want the council to approve of what I do.
I feel like I'm taking airtime tonight. I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to be my question, which is like, what's the catch? What am I missing? Because normally, I don't think we'd see this kind of a thing. Like you're switching one position for another within a department, budget stays the same or even goes down. The reasoning makes sense to me. It almost feels like, I want to let you know about this in case your phone rings because somebody's saying, why do we only have one deputy? Like, is there some other thing that we should be aware of?
What you should be aware of is that your town manager is still trying to figure out where the boundary is with the manager and the council on staff.
And I will say, I think this, I love the fact that you are on this side of the line, and I would urge you to continue doing that. So I'm not at all offended that you brought it to us, or don't think it's a waste of time at all. I'm just asking the question, is there something that we're missing? It seems like there's not.
I don't think there's anything you're missing. I think that I value my relationship with the town council.
Can I ask you a question about a different position that I don't know if it's related or not? The GA position, general assistance, morphed over time. It was initially GA and only GA because that's what we thought we needed, and then it changed to a different kind of a position that I thought was either somewhere in public safety.
So, yep, we're in the final round of interviews to see if we have the candidate. I don't know if we do or not. I don't get to appear until this round. So we started out with having general assistance kind of dumped on us in the last 2 weeks of the budget process. And so we knew that I did not have the bandwidth in the town office staff to be able to manage that. we had no idea how many hours it was going to take or what the community need was, because when we had outsourced it, we really outsourced it and kind of walked away. So the initial thought had been, if we bring somebody who does GA, has to have some of the higher executive functions, administrative functions, and those folks are really hard to get on a part-time basis. And so the argument we made, or the discussion we had during the budget process, was I really needed a full-time project management level kind of individual. So we put it in. I had no idea at that time if we were going to go back to the model that we had when we had Joanna here. And that was one where it was about 50% of her time, 60% of her time was spent on general assistance, and the rest of it, special projects for the town manager, general dog's body. So all of the things that you don't even think of when you have a town, like who manages the keys and the those types of things, safety, that kind of stuff. And I had already, when I created the assistant town manager position, took some of those miscellaneous tasks and a little bit of a town manager job and put them together for that. So we had gotten a group of people together, community member who had a lot of interest, and the police chief and Glenn and HR, and brought them together, and we started to think about what are the things that a general assistance person would logically, what would work. And we kept hearing about the community paramedic positions that have come up, and we met with the folks from Topsom that have one of the area's probably most vibrant community paramedic program. And when she was describing what she was doing, I was like, oh, it's like an at-home general assistance person who can help you manage your Social Security change, your interactions with federal agencies, state and federal agencies, and who can do home safety checks and draw your blood if that's what your doctor needs, and do wound care. How awesome is that? And as we were contemplating that, I think it really seemed to check a lot of boxes for the community. The problem that so we have candidates that are all paramedics and all very qualified. The question that I have is, do they want to do the rest of the stuff? Because it's not be a paramedic and, oh, by the way, 10 hours of GA is thrown in. In order for the position to really work, it is a third GA, a third community response, and a third kind of that community paramedic program. So the chiefs and I have met and talked about it. We're going to let this process go through. Right now, Carrie Weeman, our deputy clerk, and Chris has learned a lot, are on the boots on the ground with GA, and I do kind of when they have questions and when there are tough conversations to have, they always seem to pull me out. And it's actually been a really good way for me to learn more about the community. But if we don't get the person that we need here, the plan would be to go back to the table. I do want the GA person to be an outward-facing community response person as opposed to an inward-facing internal administrative other side. I'm watching how Glenn and Carrie work together, and it's really cool. But I think maybe instead of if the community paramedic community response doesn't work and we end up going back to the table, I would probably look at shifting the duties a little bit more. But we have it under control. We don't have anybody waiting to be seen. And Chris and Carrie tell me they love it. There we go.
think that answered all of my questions about it.
All right, so I think we can tell the chief that we can do internal postings, and we're good to go.
I would just say about that, I appreciate the explanation. I think it's a continuation of a long-running professionalization of the fire department and the rescue department. And there are a lot of financial implications to that rolling process, and I know we have issues with the facility because of that changeover. But as Dan said, it's rare that we get a step along that professionalization that is actually going to save us money, at least in the short term.
I was gonna say, I'm not promising it will save, but I don't believe it will cost us any more.
Can I just add a note of thanks to the two chiefs, and that I hope you'll carry back to your departments, that I love the fact that we're up here discussing fiscal matters and budget this and all that, and not something more serious about big problems that we have in the departments, because we don't have any, because they're really well run. So as a counselor, I really appreciate the work that you guys do and that your department does. I think we're a lucky town to have you guys and your teams.
And I appreciate the thought you're putting into the GA in the community response position. And as this process plays out, I look forward to getting updates as well.
So, yeah, and I will just say this, that the absolute best person for the position might be sitting in, that resume might be sitting in my desk in the second round, and I don't want to discount that. I also have learned that thinking a few steps ahead puts me in a position to pivot a little better. I am not giving up on the idea, if we don't end up doing it with the GA position, of community paramedicine here, because I think in Freeport, I think it's a service that makes a lot of sense. But I think that there are some members of the department that have had some other ideas on how we might be able to do it in a cost-effective way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we'll move on to our third. What?
It's Rick. No, mind. Yeah, it's all about Rick. Yep. Okay.
Are we ready?
We are. This is
Okay.
you.
This is the third order of business. So progress on meeting council goals and priorities. This one's a little multifaceted. It's a good way for me to prime council on our January 11th goal setting, which will be 9 a.m. at the community room in the library.
January 11th.
Saturday?
Yep.
I said that.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Yeah.
And Sophie will bring treats, I'm told.
Yeah, I promised I would bring some, if you're coming out on a Saturday, I'll bring some treats.
We'll get some treats.
Maybe I'll ask Caroline to bring some treats, because
She
she's
did.
joining
She
us.
voluntold you
Yep.
earlier today. So I'm not sure exactly. I guess I'm the facilitator, Sophie told me today. So we'll figure out exactly what we're trying to do, and I'll send out some more information about expectations and pre-work before.
So before that meeting, hopefully by January 7th, because everybody should have a goal, I'm working on a memo that would talk about kind of what I've done thus far in one place, and some at least initial thoughts of priorities that I have. Just, it's always nice when the council and the management align on their priorities. So I thought that might also help kind of guide or give you some feedback, or let you know you need to give me some feedback.
Right, because last year when you were brand new, we didn't get through the goal setting process for very good reason. So this is kind of, we'll play catch up, revisit some of the directives you believe you were hired to oversee. What are the barriers there? Where are the opportunities? What's the progress? And then kind of set the track for 2025.
Yep. Want me to take number 3?
Sure, yeah.
So I think I started this conversation with some counselors, and believe in transparency, so just want to put it out there that one of the most pressing priorities that I took away from my whole hire process was the goal of making Freeport more accessible and inviting for investment in our community. Whether it be through things we were doing in the downtown vision, we talked a lot about my experience and beliefs around the business community and permitting, and that's where we've come to the investment that the council has made in bringing in and creating an economic development, an internal economic development position that oversees code and planning. And I have been feeling like we've been hitting many of those benchmarks. I think that Brett is doing a great job. I didn't know that we'd ever be able to replace Caroline without seeing a big dip, but I think Kyle has come in and is doing a phenomenal job. And we are seeing a team really blending with code enforcement. And code, I think, is getting support to be able to help people through code issues, which has been kind of really nice to see. So we're investing time there. We're also investing an incredible amount of staff time, board time, and tax dollars on evaluating and trying to rewrite the design review ordinance, looking at our permitting processes, trying to streamline things down so that a developer, and I mean a developer in a very broad term, can meet with staff and have confidence in getting their way through a system. So as part of the planning board and project review board joint workshop on the design review process, there was a memo that went out around stakeholder feedback, specifically around design review. And I was concerned by the feedback that they received, in that I have seen some of that happening when I've been going to most of the PRB meetings, and I think that in order for us to move this goal, the goalpost here, actually get across the goalpost, I really think that council's vision needs to be clearly communicated to the committees. And I don't think that we should reduce or eliminate the standards that we have until it's gone through the vetting process. But I think it's important that we don't make people cry at meetings, and we are staying in the lane where we are. And that if somebody, a property owner has a right to do things with their property, unless it is specifically, there's a standard that they have to meet. Like, you have a right to develop your property. So if you're telling people if you're curtailing that right, you have to tie it to a standard in the ordinance, and it has to be clear. And I have some concern when I read that feedback. I had hoped that I'd be able to have executive session conversations, because we have people who are doing the very best they can and dedicated volunteers serving on those boards. But it's a barrier to being able to get the council vision adopted. And there is no way for us, it's not a personnel matter, there is no way for us to have group conversations. And I don't want to undermine what the good work they've done, and I don't want them to feel like they are not appreciated, because they are very much, but they're appreciated to do the work that within their scope and in a pleasant and productive way. So that's my feeling. I can't speak for the council unless the council speaks to me.
And so I think the reason, this is kind of tied up with a bow, the reason it's coming up is because this is a barrier to you reaching the goals and milestones and directives you feel the council has given you.
Yes.
Yeah. So what would be helpful is you're looking for guidance or discussion or?
I can share my concern. I can share my concern that I am not sure that the council's vision has been clearly articulated to the boards and committees.
Would that be to get to yes?
To be pleasant, productive, and to stay within the scope of the ordinance.
Right. But to get to a point where, yes, you can do this.
So it sounds like, just looking back at the committee schedule, meeting schedule, we are doing our goal setting on Saturday, the 11th, and then we're meeting with committee chairs the following Tuesday. And is that something that we could talk about, this topic is something we could talk about at the goal setting and then be able to articulate that goal setting to those committee chairs the following week?
So council can do however, council can tackle this or not as you please. My job is to share my concern and to, here's the thing. I've had several conversations with the committee chair, and the committee chair has been trying individually to work with people. And so I would very much like to see perhaps a joint workshop to talk about the design review, stakeholder feedback, and council goals before the next project review board meeting, which is after your goal setting, I believe.
Would that be similar to the workshop that the council, PRB, and planning board had just last year? I think it was August of last year, in preparation for sort of emergency amendments to the design review ordinance. I mean, that was at the library.
I think that was before my time.
Before your time.
So it wasn't, August of last
Yes,
year. Gotcha.
August
Yep.
of '23.
Yep. Sure.
I mean, would it be helpful to have both of those groups together, or
I'm in support of I don't think we need to set this on fire. I don't think we need to kind of make this a huge, burn it all down situation. I think if there can be a workshop before the next PRB, where it's just sort of a level set, let's have a conversation about council goals and current barriers. Let's see how that goes.
My concern is that I've got this goal that I think is part of why you've hired me. And I'm pushing and pushing, but if we haven't articulated that to very dedicated volunteers about what we kind of expect and want, that makes it harder, I think. And I feel like if you could sit, or some members of council could sit with the PRB and simply have the conversation about what's important to council, you have incredibly dedicated, smart, wonderful people on that board who maybe just need a little bit of more orientation to what their decisions mean for the town.
And I think it's spot on where we need to, if we don't articulate them, they can't be met. So making sure that we have those conversations, not just right now because things aren't going the way we want them to, but consistently having those conversations. Don't wait till it's not working, but how can we regularly make sure we're on track?
Yeah, here's the bigger issue is how do we bring people onto the boards? I think we nominate them and then they're on the board, and there's no process in between. We don't have, as the appointments, you don't have the time to do it. Yeah, there's no welcome aboard. This is what we do. This is what your job is. It's, you can kind of read the ordinance, right?
So we have those boards. So this is where you and I might not necessarily agree, right? When I look at the list of boards and committees, I see an absolute hierarchy in that. Your PRB, your planning board, your Board of Appeals, your local Board of Assessment Review, Coastal Waters, are ones that are acting in legal capacity, not advisory to the board, not advisory to the council, right? So with each one of those, we try to get them board training before they actually sit as board members and make decisions. I think that, so I've met with PRB chair and planning board chair, and one of the things that they both brought up is that they would really like to see when there is an appointment for the chair of planning board and project review board, and I would say appeals board, I think you could go down through the line, having conversations with the appointments committee formally, like that, just be a part of the process, because you have to have a balance of skill set on, especially PRB, I would say coastal waters would be another one, planning board, that yes, it's always valuable to have somebody on one of those boards that doesn't have a lot of specific technical knowledge, but you don't want your entire board to be people who have never been on a job site or never looked at development or never, whatever the case may be. So I think, to your point, Chip, I think that there are shifts we can make. One of the other shifts we've made is with those committees. Caroline and Chris have worked together. Chris has reached out to all of the members on planning board and project review board that are coming up for appointment to ask now whether or not they plan to seek reappointment. The final thing is there's a balance for the council, right? You have these volunteers who, without volunteers, our work doesn't get done, right? They are incredibly important to the municipal process. However, just because somebody wants to be a board member or there isn't anybody immediately in the seat to replace them on these quasi-judicial regulatory boards, I think that it needs to be a much more of an evaluation of what are the skills on the committee and what are the needs of the committee. And that's really easy for me to say because as an appointed administrator who never has to make that decision, that's really easy for me to say, yeah, you just go do that. But I do think that if we looked at kind of treating those boards a little bit differently than the advisory boards, because I think the advisory boards are where where people just wanting to be there and being excited and wanting to learn something new it's a wonderful place for them to learn about how the town works. I think the other committees, there's got to be a balance in that.
Yeah, and I think there needs to be a conversation about what are the things that they are allowed to do and how far the reach is, instead of like, well, it's my opinion, this is what's going on. Well, no, that's their land and they can do whatever they want. We limit it, but we only limit it to this much. So that part needs to be expressed maybe more than once or twice over the course.
While Chalmers is going to the microphone, I would just like to say that I think having the conversation is great. I also think we need to be open to hearing from the members of the board what are their challenges, what has their experience been, how do they see this process, because they may be looking at it very differently. I do, as somebody who goes to a lot of PRB meetings, I think in many cases, you have folks that are tasked with making a decision that is exceedingly complex because they're evaluating projects on almost countless metrics across multiple ordinances. And I think there is a lot of pressure to get it right. And so there is, I think, a lot sitting on their shoulders, and hearing what those concerns are might also be helpful as to how we can better frame the conversation.
And I think that's kind of, sorry, Chalmers, one moment. I think that's kind of what we're trying to get at here is just have the conversation.
Yeah.
We don't have to start thinking in like a punitive corrective action. Just like having the conversation is a good place to start. Chalmers, go ahead.
I just want to say I think you guys are definitely on the right track here. And as a former member of the Board of Appeals, we didn't have any selection process about who was going to be the chair. It was rotated up. You started off with the secretary, vice chair, chair, and personally, I don't think that's the way to do these very important boards. I think the idea of going to the appointments committee is a great idea. Thank you.
I don't want to belabor it, but I think it's a really good opportunity for us. I really like what Eric had to say about listening and approaching it as a partnership, right? We have this shared goal, this shared vision for the town. We do this part, you do this part, you do this part. How can we all achieve what we want to achieve? And we really need your help. So I think it's a good opportunity I think Sophie can augment the message, but it needs to come from us.
I think it's a really challenging one, right? Like, to me, the things that are resonating are maybe it's a question around training on technical assistance and just better understanding the role. There are definitely some norms around professionalism that I think just speak across the board to who we are as a town, and those are easier to deal with. But we also need to be mindful that, maybe this isn't the right word, but we can't meddle too much in this because there is a hierarchy, and we can't tell these boards and committees, we need you to do this, this, and this explicitly, because then what's the point of even having them? So I think it's very much a fact-finding, a conversation, understanding, figuring out what the root cause of some of these challenges are, and figuring out what we can and can't do about it. But there's some easy ones, right? Like, we shouldn't be making anybody cry at meetings. Like, there's professionalism, there's decorum. Like, these should be things that we can address. But I think some of the stickier ones are if they're trying to make really complex decisions based on a series of ordinances and regulations. Like, we need to figure out how to make it easier to come to clear and defensible decisions.
And I think that the work we're doing with ordinance cleanup and that work is absolutely there. The other thing I've done for Appeals Board and Coastal Waters, they've had some, by the time something gets to the Appeals Board and Nick hasn't been able to explain whatever, it is usually quite complex. We had somebody speak to that at the end of the last Appeals Board meeting. So at this point, given the cost to the town when it doesn't go well, I bring Amy in to sit with the board. She's really good with boards. So I think that's something that we should be doing on a case-by-case as necessary kind of basis. And I think that you make the point, not only can you not, because why would we other appoint them, all of these groups, the 5 that I've talked about, specifically, council cannot meddle in their efforts, that you can't say you need to allow this to go through, and you can't have opinions on what's in front of them. So I think, so I appreciate that, and I'm just like giving you the gold star thumbs up, make sure that's a message that's important. And I also think that, Dan, if I thought I could manage this and not have to talk on camera about this, I would have. And I do think this is a council role for me to support.
Did you get what you need, or?
Everybody's okay with the joint workshop?
Yep.
Carolyn, what date is that?
I would have to look at the calendar. We're doing messed up with the holiday, a comp plan.
January 14th.
And ERP would be the third Wednesday.
Will we be doing it before PRB?
Yep.
You need all three boards or just PRB?
You want to do PB, PRB, and council?
Is,
Or just,
I would just do PRB
Yeah.
and council.
That would be easier to, I'm having trouble because I'm not on the
Yep.
phone.
That's what that is.
Sorry, Tom. I think if you were so we've done joint workshops in the past with all three. We've also done townwide board and committee trainings. We've done a variety of different things. We've done legal trainings. I think if you want to schedule just council and PRB, that will be easier to do than the planning board because they have that extra meeting in there. And I think Brett and Kyle could help find a day that they could get the PRB members and the council members there.
is this workshop with council and board, or is this discussion with a counselor or two? And
So it's got to be a public meeting, anyway, if we're going to talk to the whole board, which I think we need to talk to the whole board. So I think it's a matter of, it would be nice if counselors could arrive, and I think I want to, embrace my strength and not being shy to tell people what I think, but and I can be diplomatic, but I think there are counselors that are much more diplomatic than I am that might be better, that I think would be important to have there.
We had done like a roundtable here with council, like when we were talking about cannabis and just kind of, what the work plan of the planning board was. This was a couple years ago. Maybe Dan was there. I don't know if anyone else was on council, but it was just, casual sitting around in a circle, just kind of going back and forth. So we could have a series of things to talk about and Q&A type thing.
Yeah, I think casual is a keyword. So.
Yeah, it's nice when you have mixed boards and you don't have one sitting up there and one down here. It's like awkward. Yes, that's what I mean, Chip.
Seal. Great, so we'll find a date.
Yep.
Great, thank you. I'm really delighted by that conversation. I think that went well, so thank you all.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Oh.
Love it.
All right.
We vote.
All those in favor? I was still talking, but I guess we're done.